I've read a lot of classic books in my career. A lot of Dumas is one of my favorites. And I'm going to have to say that reading Don Quixote has never been something that was necessarily high on my list. Nothing about it appealed to me. Basically, the only thing you ever see from it is the tilting at windmills part, where you sort of get that ideology of a man who is very deluded and out of reality, kind of. And that's kind of everything that you have with him. Then he sort of has his lumpy sidekick, who Sancho Panza, who goes along with everything. So I did not actually read the unabridged real translation of Don Quixote. I read an abridgment because that's all my life has time for if I think something is not going to really be worth my time. Interestingly enough, I would suggest at least reading a good adaptation of Don Quixote, because the actual book is very, very different from what the sort of pop culture thing that has come away from Don Quixote is. He is a little bit of a pitiful figure in some ways, and that's often how he is portrayed in different media. But on the whole, I didn't really feel that bad for him. There's a lot of people laughing at what he was doing, but Don Quixote is so sure of himself that I never really felt bad. And so many times, so many things actually kind of go his way that I also didn't feel bad for him at all. There is the part that doesn't ever get mentioned, that there's a duchess, I believe she is in here, that he sort of befriends in this way as he's going along, that he thinks that she is, well, he saves her because she's in disguise and she was trying to marry this man and it got all messed up and this sort of thing. So he ends up kind of getting involved in her romance and getting her where she can marry the guy that she was hoping to marry. But she ends up being a duchess and very powerful, and she just loves Don Quixote and thinks he's wonderful. And she's kind of a little bit of a character of fun, too, because she does some stuff that you're just like, oh, honey, no. And she does some kind of foolish things sometimes, but it's just one of these things that you see. She's kind of delighted by him. She's delighted by Sancho Panza, and I think that's maybe the thing that we don't take away from kind of the pop culture take on Don Quixote. We just have this sort of, oh, everybody's laughing at this guy who's really deluded. Well, he is really deluded, and a lot of people are laughing at him at different points and laughing at Sancho Panza, but they also end up being successful many times in what they're trying to do, whether they know they're doing that or not. Like Sancho Panza ends up getting not accidentally, but the Duchess makes him a governor of this town, and he sort of inadvertently ends up making this town like becoming their hero by doing all this sort of great stuff as a governor. Like, he's accidentally a great governor. You have Don Quixote, who accidentally saves people and does different things at different points and sort of blunders into all sorts of situations. He ends up with bandits end up taking him hostage, but are so charmed by him. I think that's the thing that we don't see in many of the pop culture things, that yes, he's deluded, and Sancho Panza is just this kind of goof that is his sidekick, trusty sidekick, but people end up walking away just charmed by these two in many ways. And Sancho is the sidekick, but he really does like Don Quixote. There is just this really interesting relationship between the two of them. And yeah, it's just not what I had perceived it to be based off of kind of what the takeaway generally is of this. yes, he is a deluded old man who thinks he is a knight and thinks he is doing all this knightly stuff and gets very frustrating sometimes because of what he insists and different things. But he also, this is a comedy. This is not a book about. This is not a book where we're supposed to sit here and just look at this downward spiral of this pitiful old man and his delusions. It's not. It's like this man with delusions is going off and doing this stuff, and inadvertently all these adventures are happening as he's going along and doing these things and getting involved in all sorts of trouble and crazy things that are happening. So I ended up taking away a very different take on Don Quixote, and maybe that's just my personal take on how it was written and what was going on, but it is not, to me, it is not the look at the foibles of fantasy and delusion and things here. It's not really that. It's like you've got a character who's doing that, and does end up looking ridiculous many times, but also everybody around him kind of being better off in many situations, or at least just being amused by what is happening and what they're watching with these two men. So I would suggest finding an adaptation. I would not necessarily try plunging into the real thing, but it ended up being far more likable than I thought the book was going to be.